Margaret had always held a firm belief that raising her son, Daniel, would be the most profound, rewarding, and simultaneously demanding endeavor she would ever undertake in her life. From the very moment he first opened his eyes to the world, she had poured every fragment of her love, care, and unending energy into nurturing him, shaping the environment around him so he could grow into a person of integrity, kindness, and inner strength. Each day was a delicate balancing act between providing structure and freedom, encouragement and discipline, guidance and space, yet she embraced it with unwavering determination. Now, as Daniel reached the milestone of his 18th birthday, Margaret confronted a bittersweet realization that tugged at her heart. The little boy who had once clung to her hand while learning to walk, the same boy whose laughter had once filled every corner of their modest Ohio home, was no longer a child. He was evolving into a young man, standing on the cusp of adulthood, poised to take his first real steps into the world beyond her immediate care. Their suburban home, cozy and filled with decades of memories, seemed both familiar and achingly quiet in this moment of transition. The walls echoed the past, the sound of his joyful shouts from basketball games in the driveway, the whispered confessions shared over late-night homework at the dining table, and countless evenings curled up on the couch with popcorn and movies, laughter intertwining with silence in equal measure. And yet, behind the warmth of these cherished memories, Margaret felt an almost imperceptible tension coiling within her, a constant, nagging worry that maybe, just maybe, she had not done enough to prepare him for the challenges that awaited. The story of change began one particularly crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air carries both a chill and a promise of new beginnings. Margaret sat at her kitchen counter, cradling a steaming mug of coffee in her hands, watching as the early sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a golden glow over the familiar kitchen. Daniel appeared in the doorway, his tall, lean frame almost casting a shadow across the room, his backpack carelessly slung over one shoulder, as if he had just arrived from a night that had stretched longer than it should have. "Morning, Mom," he greeted, his voice now deeper and resonant, the confident timbre of adolescence unmistakable. "Morning, sweetheart," Margaret replied, her voice warm but tinged with a hint of concern. She noticed something in the way his shoulders slumped slightly, in the fatigue that clouded his eyes. "Late night studying again?" she asked, gentle but probing. Daniel hesitated for a moment, glancing at the floor, then muttered, "Yeah, something like that." Margaret wanted to push further, to ask about the stress, the pressures, the things he might be bottling up. But she restrained herself, remembering the delicate truth she had learned over the years. 18-year-olds often needed space to navigate their own thoughts. Yet there was something in his expression, a subtle mix of worry and quiet resignation, that lingered in her mind throughout the day, refusing to let her rest. That evening, Margaret resolved to check in on him more intentionally. She approached his room softly, knocked lightly on the door, and pushed it open with care. The room was a familiar, chaotic landscape of teenage life, open notebooks scattered across the desk, essays partially completed, a laptop glowing faintly in the dim light. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, staring into the distance as if trying to find an escape in his own thoughts. "What's troubling you, honey?" Margaret asked quietly, settling beside him on the bed. Daniel exhaled deeply, a mix of frustration and fatigue evident in the sigh. "It's just, everything feels so heavy, Mom," he admitted. "College applications, part-time work, keeping my grades up. Sometimes it feels like I can't breathe." Margaret's heart ached as she reached out, taking his hand in hers and giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice steady and tender, "you don't have to carry all of this on your own. I am here, always." That simple, heartfelt moment marked the beginning of a profound transformation in their relationship. Margaret realized that in her tireless dedication to meeting the practical demands of life, bills, meals, schedules, she had perhaps overlooked the need to simply be present with her son during this pivotal transition into adulthood. That night, she silently promised herself that she would do everything in her power to guide him, support him, and navigate the difficult truths together, no matter how uncomfortable they might be. In the weeks that followed, Margaret began to notice more signs of Daniel's struggle. He stayed up late into the night, often missing meals, and became increasingly withdrawn from the world around him. The once vibrant boy who had spent hours dribbling basketballs down the driveway now seemed trapped within the confines of his own mind. One Sunday afternoon, recognizing that gentle guidance alone might not suffice, she invited Daniel for a drive, a quiet reprieve, a chance to speak heart to heart, a gesture they hadn't shared in years. The countryside unfolded before them in a blaze of autumn color, the trees adorned in fiery shades of red, gold, and orange, leaves swirling and drifting lazily along winding roads. Margaret spoke first, her voice calm yet earnest. "Daniel, I know things feel difficult right now, but I want you to understand that it's okay not to have everything figured out. You're just 18. Life isn't a race. There is no timeline you must follow." Daniel remained silent for a long moment, then whispered, almost to himself, "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing before I've even started." Margaret guided the car to a scenic overlook, stopping so they could take in the expanse of the valley below. She turned to him, eyes glistening with sincerity. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "You are not failing. You are learning. You are growing. Every mistake you make, every doubt, every tear, it is all part of your journey. And I will stand by you, no matter what happens." Daniel looked at her, his eyes glistening, vulnerability evident. "Do you really mean that?" he asked, voice trembling. "With all my heart," Margaret assured him. And in that instant she witnessed a subtle yet profound shift. The weight of anxiety lifted slightly from his shoulders, even if only for a moment. He allowed himself to collapse into her embrace, finally letting down the mask of strength he had felt compelled to maintain. From that day forward, their bond began to transform. Margaret and Daniel established weekly routines, not dictated by chores or academic deadlines, but by genuine connection, walks in the park, shared meals, and revisiting simple joys like basketball games in the driveway. Yet, while their relationship deepened, Margaret wrestled privately with her own feelings. She realized how much she had relied on Daniel emotionally ever since his father had left years ago. Guilt occasionally crept in, making her question whether she had leaned too heavily on him, blurred the lines between parent and confidant. But she reminded herself that honesty, love, and mutual respect were the cornerstones of their relationship. Then one evening, as Margaret prepared dinner, Daniel hesitated at the kitchen entrance. "Mom," he began cautiously, I think I don't want to go to college right away." Margaret froze for a moment. College had always seemed like the natural, inevitable next step in her vision for his future. But as she looked into his earnest, contemplative face, she chose understanding over fear. "Then don't," she replied after a thoughtful pause. "If you need time to explore, to figure out what truly matters to you, take it. Life isn't about rushing to meet expectations. It's about discovering what ignites your passion, what makes you feel alive." Daniel blinked in surprise. "You're not disappointed?" "Never," Margaret said firmly. "I am proud of you for being honest with yourself." That choice became a turning point. Daniel embraced a gap year, dedicating himself to part-time work while exploring various interests and passions. Margaret stood unwaveringly by his side, defending his autonomy even in the face of neighbors' whispers and relatives' criticisms. She showed him that love was not control. It was acceptance, trust, and unwavering support. Over the following months, Daniel flourished. He discovered a passion for photography, immersing himself in capturing fleeting moments, natural landscapes, and candid expressions. Margaret encouraged his creative pursuits, secretly saving up to surprise him with a second-hand camera. When he presented his first portfolio, tears sprang to her eyes. "These are incredible, Daniel," she said softly, voice thick with emotion. "You have a true gift." Daniel smiled shyly. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you." By spring, Daniel's confidence had grown immensely. The anxious, self-critical boy had transformed into a young man who embraced life with curiosity, courage, and self-assurance. Margaret, too, had changed. She realized that guiding her son had not been a burden, but a choice to love fully and unconditionally, to release fear and judgment, and instead embrace trust and support. One evening, as they sat side by side on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Daniel turned to her. "Mom, you've been my anchor through everything. I honestly don't know where I'd be without you."